All right, so we're here for episode 2 of our unnamed, unknown frequency podcast.
Yeah, we're gonna have to do an audience participation, give us some
put a name idea in the comments.
Yeah, that's a good idea because we're gonna have to come up with something at some point.
Yeah, we had some interesting ones when Colin and I had tried to do that in the past. So, but today we're gonna talk about the housing crisis. Specifically in New Hampshire.
Such a fun topic.
But we're going to go freewheeling with this if it's okay with you. Everything that's feeding into it, all the factors, what we can do about it, how we got here, the whole 9 yards. And maybe it's a generational thing, but I think this is the biggest economic issue of our time.
At least for us, yeah. I think so. I think people don't even realize it's happening.
No, because if you're not interacting with the real estate market to move, if you're not buying or selling, how would you?
But we talk about inflation and groceries, and yeah, those are everyday issues. But I think that a lot of the inflation numbers are driven by real estate,
100%.
Driven by the housing market. And I think a lot of people don't realize that it's not just about the price of eggs.
No.
It's about the price of housing. And housing, here's a fact. We don't need eggs to survive. We need shelter.
Yeah,
we do need houses. We need apartments, and whether you're buying or renting, we need that. And at least in our area and most parts of the country, but in our area, especially, I feel like it's becoming more and more precious,
100%
and unaffordable. And there's things that we can do about it, but we just need the gumption to do it.
Let's set the stage for everybody, for someone who might not know exactly where we're at. It's March of 2025. And the affordability index for New Hampshire is hovering right around 60. And I think the affordability index is a very important thing to define. And it's my go-to measure of where we're at month to month. Not that it has changed very much as of late. But the affordability index is measuring your median household income, not individual income, but median household income for the state of New Hampshire against the mortgage payment on a median priced home if you're putting 20% down. So we're not talking about doing 0% down VA, 3.5% FHA. This is someone who can put 20% down, right, which is not that many people nowadays. And
which means that probably for most people, the index is worse.
Way worse. Yes, absolutely. 100%. It is probably 20% worse is what it works out to, right? Yeah. But the index is at 60. Median household income, and I'm rounding here, guys. I'm going fast. Please do your own homework on the numbers as I'm saying them, but I'm going to be close. I'm within a couple percent. Median household income in New Hampshire is about $96,000 a year. Last time I checked it, maybe it's 97 now. It's just under 100 now. And with the
which is, to interject, high nationwide.
Yeah.
We're one of the highest
That's
nationwide.
Very high nationwide.
So we make more money on average than most of the country does.
100%. The affordability index is at 60 though. And what that means is that the median household income is only 60% of what is necessary to qualify for the mortgage on the median home. So in order to qualify for that mortgage, I ran the numbers before this, it's about $160,000 for your median household income to afford the median home in New Hampshire. That's a problem. That means that's a huge problem because a normal person can't buy what a normal house in our state anymore. It's just not even a possibility.
Or rent.
No, not.
We're not even getting into rentals. But
I'll say, and obviously that's not our wheelhouse specifically, but I think it was in almost all of 2024, New Hampshire had the lowest apartment for 1 and 2 bedroom apartments. We had the lowest vacancy rate in the country. It was 0.6%.
Right.
So for every 200 apartments, there is one that is available for rent. Is what that means.
Yeah, and that means that we need more.
Yeah.
Because we'll get into this more in detail, but the overlying arch of this whole conversation is we need more housing units in the state of New Hampshire.
Housing units in New Hampshire right now, and I think this transfers a good bit over into the parts of Maine that we work in as well. And it certainly transfers to Massachusetts, which I don't work in, but I know you do.
Right.
Is housing units right now are rare and unaffordable and hyper competitive. And we're going to get into some politics in this as well, believe it or not, because the housing issue is not a left versus right thing. It's not blue versus red at any stretch of the imagination.
Everybody on the political spectrum.
100%. But housing should be abundant, affordable, and we should have all different types for all different folks.
Yeah, because what I just said, it's necessary for survival.
Exactly. 100%.
Plain and simple.
So let's talk. I'm going to go way back in time. I don't even know if you're ready for how far I'm going here, but prior to World War II, we're going way back. It was super normal for someone to have an interest-only mortgage that was like a 5-year note that was 50% down.
Yep.
For your house.
I mean, we're talking about think like It's a Wonderful Life, right?
Yeah.
Like the, building and loan companies. This is before modern mortgages, before, the Federal Housing Administration, Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac. I mean, if we were going to talk about like history, like this is before what we all know of as mortgages and mortgage lending even existed.
Yep.
This is where we came together and they deposited money in their local bank, and the local bank handed out these mortgages. Yep. I don't know if they were really considered mortgages at the time, but they really was what they were.
Yeah, they
totally
were
different.
And the local banks had a much lower risk tolerance, and these mortgages they weren't being resold on a secondary market. None of that existed, and your ability to get a loan was almost more based on your reputation in your community.
Yeah, but the credit scores didn't exist.
No,
I mean, credit scores. I don't know if people know this or not, but credit scores are a very modern thing. Credit scores really didn't exist, at least of what we know them to exist, until maybe like 40 years ago.
That's crazy.
I mean, credit scores are fairly new. And even then, I mean, Experian didn't exist until the 90s.
Yeah.
You had TransUnion and Equifax, but Experian didn't exist until the 90s. Like, I mean, I was born before, maybe you weren't. I'm not sure what year in the 90s it was, but I was born before Experian existed. So think about all those people that have the Experian app on your phone.
Yep.
Like that wasn't around. And so credit scoring models are a very new modern thing. So when you're talking about going back pre-World War II, or even, I mean, a lot of the pre-internet, there was no credit scoring.
Yeah. 100%.
People just, it was a reputation. You knew the branch manager that was going to give you the loan,
Absolutely. And so we had the Great Depression. And there were some programs that ended up existing to mean you could have like a 40% down payment or a 30% down payment. And suddenly you needed to have less in order to buy a home. And when I'm talking about this, I just want to set the context of my words here. I'm not assigning whether these things are good or bad. We're just talking about how we got here in the first place.
Right.
I'm not going to put my opinion that far in the past. I'm going to put a lot of my opinion on the future, though.
Yeah.
So then we had World War II. All the vets came home, and we built a ton. And it's funny, if you look at most towns, there's no houses built between 42 and 45.
Right,
because there was no building.
We were building airplanes and bombs.
Yeah, exactly. A little different priorities at that point. But all these vets came home. Everybody had kids. The baby boomer generation.
That's when they were born.
That's literally where they came
from.
Yeah. And we built tons of single family homes. Like millions of them, I think.
Yeah. And I mean, and we'll get into more details of this, but we weren't building them. I'm going to give away a little bit of our future here in our conversation. We weren't building them on 3 or 5 acre lots.
No.
They were building them on postage stamps. That's how a lot of suburbia got built.
And they weren't, these houses were, if you had a 1,500 square foot house, that was the mansion of the neighborhood.
Literally 1,000 square foot, 2, maybe 3 bedroom capes and ranches, and it was just boom, boom, and all the same, and they just knocked them out because they needed housing.
And if
people needed places to live.
Drive around any town, probably in America, but we're talking about New England here and New Hampshire specifically. Drive around anywhere and you'll see these houses all over the place from the late 40s, the 50s, and the 60s. They are everywhere, and they're what most people call normal houses. And or I guess now we call them starter homes now. Yeah. And as time went on, we realized, hey, all these programs to make housing more affordable and make it more of a possibility for people, we can use that to increase the cost of housing. It's increases the value of it.
Right, yeah.
So
it becomes a commodity at that point. Not just, that's where housing becomes a commodity.
Exactly.
It's not just a place for people to live, but it actually is an investment.
And I'll make the argument, I will put a little of my opinion here. I'm already going to go back on what I said, but I'll make the argument that, and I don't know that there's any way to change this, but housing's primary purpose is shelter. And we talk about it very frequently. It's spoken about in the news, inside of the industry as an investment vehicle, like it's a financial product. That's not what it should be.
Well, not primarily.
No,
I mean, because there's space for that, right?
Yeah.
I mean, we need rentals, right? That's an investment. People have investment places because they have rentals. Because there are some people that don't, or they're not in a spot in their life now, or may never be, or may never want to be. There are people that don't want to own homes, and that's totally okay.
Yeah.
Totally okay. So rentals and investment properties are necessary. But no, housing should not be driven by that.
That's the financialization of it.
Right.
So what we've seen, I'm going to skip a lot of time here as we go ahead, because I don't have specific dates for when different programs are introduced or anything like that. But between then, baby boomer generation, we build a ton, and now a couple of things have happened. The average size of a house has increased substantially. I mean, I think the average new construction is like 2,700 square feet, something like that.
Which, for those of you keeping track at home, is more than double what they were building after World War II.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, in a lot of circumstances, just about triple.
Mm-hmm.
So so there's the average size has gone up. The number of homes has gone down substantially that are being built.
Well, because it takes longer to build the bigger houses.
Exactly. And they're more expensive as a result of there's the economic factors at play, but simply because it's a bigger house. And one of the point that I love to make, and never take anything I say as saying that someone should just lower your standard of living or something like that. If you look at what was available on a house built in like 1955, I'll just use that arbitrarily. If you look at the features and amenities in that house, it's not even close to what new construction looks like today. There's no granite countertops. Your refrigerator didn't have an iPad in it. You know what I mean?
My favorite example, and I bang my drum on this all the time, is like, we need to go back to building expansion capes.
Yeah.
Right. So where the second floor isn't even complete, you just have a first floor. You maybe have maybe two bedrooms on the first floor. You have a living room. You have a eat-in kitchen. You have a bathroom, and you have two bedrooms.
I haven't seen one of those in a while.
And then you have a staircase that goes up to a whole second floor that's just waiting to be built out. Because then, when you can afford it, you finish the second floor.
Absolutely.
So it's cheaper. It's, you're not including that in the square footage when you buy that house, or you can build that house. It's faster. You're not worrying about a second floor, but it's ready to go. So you can put a second bathroom upstairs. You can put two bedrooms, maybe three, depending on the footprint of the house,
100%
upstairs later.
It's been a long time. I've been in a few of those the past few years, but it's been a while since I've seen one that wasn't finished already.
Yeah. I mean, that's my answer.
Still exists.
My answer, I will tell you, like, I'm giving away the end of this. My answer to this whole thing is expansion capes.
It's an interesting one.
I mean, there's more to it.
Yeah,
but
no, that's an interesting
one. That's where I've been like saying, like, that's what builders need to be. The problem, of course, is they're not making a lot of money on them.
It's true.
And for a builder to want to build a house, they probably want to turn a profit.
Let's go back in the timeline just a little bit for another piece of this that's important to talk about. So you've got the standards of the houses, like the types of houses that are built, the type of housing that's built has changed and become, there's only a few things that are built nowadays. Let's go to right before the housing crash of 2008. There's a lot of building. There was a lot of horrible lending practices, that sort of thing. There was a lot of things that led to that housing bubble. And I noticed this recently. I'll credit Strong Towns if you ever look into them. It's a very interesting organization. It's worth a look if you're listening to this. Talks about a lot of community stuff, a lot of housing stuff. One of the interesting things that they made a note of is that everybody talks about 2008 as a bubble, right? Like, everyone thinks about it like that. What was the messaging 2010, 11, 12, 13? We need a housing recovery. How do you recover if it was a bubble? That's the thing that everybody misses about that. It's such a subtle thing, but nobody pays attention to it. And the crazy thing that happened after 2008 is builders got walloped by that so badly that if you just think about from like 2010 to 2015, you barely ever saw a house being built. It just wasn't a thing. There was like a whole lost generation almost of construction.
Well, if you're going to build a house and you're going to spend all this money to build it and then you can't get it sold.
Yeah, absolutely.
Are you going to build the house?
100%.
Nope.
And then so you get to, and I mentioned this briefly on our last episode, I think, like 2016, 17, 18. So all these articles about how millennials are just not buying houses. They're just renting. They're living their life, doing their thing. And then we had COVID happen. Suddenly all the millennials decide, hey, now's our time. We're a perfect representation of this. Neither of us bought our houses during COVID, but He's the elder millennial. I'm not allowed to say geriatric millennial anymore.
Thank you.
It's funnier. It's much funnier. But
Fine.
and then I'm the youngest generation. I'm the youngest year for millennials. So you see and reach into Gen X a little bit, and I see and reach into Gen Z a little bit with this. And the COVID effect, and there's a couple other things with this too, but everybody suddenly, and this is a huge question a lot of people have, by the way. I should back up. Like, how did we get in the past 5 years to where we are now? There was a ton of buildup over the past 80 years. So going back to pre-World War II as to the pieces that started to get in place for us to get into what Strong Towns calls the housing trap, which is quite literally where we are now. But the millennials all deciding, our generation all deciding that we want to own a house all at the same time. The very beginning of COVID, Federal Reserve cuts the interest rates to nothing. So suddenly housing affordability goes dramatically up. And then the existing demand that was already there at the beginning of COVID was held back for quite a while. I know we talked last episode kind of about our timelines and our experiences with 2020, but for a lot of people, they didn't really start looking until the end of 2020 when things started to get a little bit more.
Yeah, they were stuck in their houses.
They were stuck in their houses. There was a lot of stuff going on. So I don't know. Am I missing anything as to how we got here? I think that just about.
No,
sums
I think
it
that's
up.
how we got here. That's how we got here. But I guess to the next point is where do we go from here? Right?
Yeah.
I mean, we talk a lot about, I said expansion capes. That's the way to do it, But and what I mean by that, and we talked in the last episode about how a first-time home buyer shouldn't expect to buy their forever home right now.
No.
Buy a house, get a property, gain some equity, and work up. And that's what the whole idea of starter homes, which has kind of become a foreign concept to a lot of people. Starter homes.
It's become a foreign concept, and we also haven't built them for such a long time in any quantity.
Right. It's also harder to find them. I mean, a starter home now is a $400,000.
Yeah.
It's
and the current. I'd like your opinion on this when I say this. My view of our current situation is that I don't think there's any way for us to go backwards. I don't think affordability, top line pricing, I don't think there is a path that we can influence it to go backwards. I think
making houses less expensive.
Yeah, I don't think that there's a reasonable possibility of that. I think
not in New Hampshire.
I think the best case we can hope for is to arrest appreciation so that it's not 5 or 10% a year, so that it's 2 or 3.
Yeah, have more availability of houses on the lower end of the spectrum.
Exactly.
I mean, we stop building the McMansions.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? We don't all need 3,000, 4,000 square foot houses. And those are the future houses for people, but there's plenty of those right now.
Exactly.
I think that it comes down to we need to, whether we incentivize or however we do it, we get builders to build affordable houses. But here's the other side of it. New Hampshire has this, I mean, I know it's kind of thought of as derogatory, but it's just a fact of life, right? We're going to get a little crazy in this episode, I think.
Controversial.
like, NIMBY, not in my backyard, right? New Hampshire, if you're from New Hampshire, people from New Hampshire, that New Hampshire has this live free or die and all this kind of stuff. But in the end,
it's live free or die until you start. We want to do whatever we want, but I can't let my neighbor do that.
Right. And that's where the NIMBY, that not in my backyard, comes from, right? It's like, we don't want this near me. I want to live in a place that has all of the stores that I want to go to. I want to live in a place that has all of these great, attributes and all this entertainment and all of everything. But I also don't want to have any neighbors. I want to have a nice quiet place, and I want to live in the woods, and I want to keep that rural charm. And New Hampshire has rural charm. That's one of the things I love about this state.
Absolutely.
Right? But the fact is that a lot of people want to live here. And he's not even talking about people moving out of state. A lot of people want to stay here, and we want to incentivize people staying here because that only helps the economy. A younger generation, younger population helps the economy in a state, right? And New Hampshire is really prime for that. But we need to be able to house these people.
Absolutely.
They can't all live across the border in Maine because the property taxes are lower.
I've heard the argument so many times from so many people. It's like, well, there's people moving here from other places, which number one shows how great the place where we live is. And
well, I'll thank that to our last governor that went on a national tour talking about how awesome New Hampshire was.
And
right? Shut up, Chris.
Seriously.
Come on, stop telling people in California and Idaho how great New Hampshire is.
It's supposed to be a secret.
This is our little secret here, man.
But The crazy piece of this when you talk to people about the housing crisis is very few people debate that we have a housing crisis. A lot of people, everybody has their own version of what the problem is. Nobody wants it. Nobody wants to be close to where it's being fixed.
No, but they need to get over themselves too. Like to a certain extent, we need to say, guess what? People need to get over themselves. They need to get over this not in my backyard attitude. And I'm not saying the entire state of New Hampshire needs to become Massachusetts either, because that's all, obviously I don't want that. But I think what people need to start doing is like, let's be reasonable about certain towns and areas and how to build. And I'm not saying we need to, build tons and tons of starter homes all over town. I'm saying cluster housing.
Yeah. So I've been in conversations with some people about this, and there's a lot of, there's a lack of information about cluster housing. So I'm going to tell you what my take is and what my understanding of it is. Tell me if I'm off base here. Let's say a town like Barrington, for example, currently as of writing, has a 2 acre minimum lot size. If we want to build 10 houses, we can either cut up 2 acres for each and, do the frontage, which is 200 feet in Barrington. So every 200 feet, there's going to be a house. Or we can take the same 20 acres. We can put the houses on a road, put them much closer together, use the other land as unused space. So it just stays as a
Green
forest.
Space. Yep.
And have the same effect, but you're not going to see the houses from the road as much. That's pretty much.
That's exactly it.
Yeah.
And I would contend if I'm driving down the road, I would much rather see, here's a development with a whole bunch of houses clustered together.
It's a neighborhood.
Cluster housing. It's a neighborhood, which also I feel like our society has gotten away from, unfortunately, but another story, for another time. Or you could be driving down a road and you see house.
I'll just use
house. And you don't see any of that green space because it's behind their house.
Yeah. 100%.
And so they get it, but you don't get to see any. All you're seeing is house after house after house. That makes me feel less like we live in this beautiful rural state.
Absolutely. It's just when you're just seeing houses. And that's what happens usually when they do a minimum lot size adjustment, which is we're going to get to that. That's a big controversy right now. What you'll see is they'll change the minimum lot size. They won't change any of the frontage requirements and say, see, we're doing this to preserve the rural character. But what actually happens is when there's a large piece of land right by the road, they're going to build the maximum number of houses per the land area. And you're going to get all these lots that are maybe
long and skinny,
1,000 feet deep and exactly one house wide plus the setbacks, which looks terrible.
Yeah.
And it's useless land for those people.
You might as well be in a city at that point.
Exactly. So,
but don't worry, you got your 2 acres.
Yeah,
or whatever the amount is. There's towns 5 acres. Like
Northwood's 5, I think.
It's just crazy. So my house, I have 2.2 acres.
Mm-hmm.
I'm telling you right now, I use maybe half an acre.
I think people have a lot of misconception
on the daily. Most of it's woods. I don't touch it. I don't walk out there. I don't go out there. I don't use it. Now, if it was all cleared, maybe it'd be a little bit different. But most of it's woods, and for most of these people, it's just woods that they're not even using.
And
but they're paying taxes on. By the way,
I won't make the argument that, if you want to own more land, everybody should have the right to do that if they want to. The argument that I'll make is, like let's say a town that has a 2 acre minimum lot size. I don't think many people can visualize that. It's a football field and a half.
Yeah, 2 acres is a lot of land.
That's like a ton of land.
Unless you're like farming or a really, really intense gardener, or you like. What are you using that land for? Again, most of it just goes unused. Yeah. It's just woods.
And if someone wants to own that, I think that's awesome. But I think forcing everyone into the box that you want to be in, I don't think that's terrible. I don't think that's in keeping with the tradition of our state to begin with.
Right.
And I think, I'll say something controversial here. I think the solution to our housing crisis, I think we can do it by building exactly one type of housing. And I'll tell you why in a second. I think we can literally just build starter homes and get ourselves out of the situation we're in. I think we could, because what you'll hear at a lot of town meetings is, I don't want any more apartments or something like that. Or then you'll hear, well, it's going to be low income apartments, or using like a derogatory thing with it, right? Or then you'll see people.
Which, by the way, remember we talked about median income at 97,000 or whatever it was.
Yeah,
low income is not that low.
No, not at all.
People can qualify for low income and still make a pretty good living.
It's crazy. I use this example with people all the time. the amount of inflation that we've experienced just the past couple of years, but just as it ticks up in general. Like when I was a kid, if you saw someone driving a new BMW, you're like, that person makes $50,000 a year. That's crazy. You know what I mean? I think you probably had a similar experience.
No, I remember actually when I graduated high school, I remember seeing, I don't know where I saw it, but I remember seeing this statistic that said in New Hampshire, to live comfortably, you had to make $50,000 a year.
Whoa.
Which is, I mean, you figure, let's say 52,000, easy math is $1,000 a week before taxes.
Mm-hmm. At the time.
At the time, maybe. I mean, this was a while ago, you know, but that's so not the case now.
Not even a little bit.
So not. $50,000 a year, I don't even know. I mean, there are people that survive on less, and I get that, but it's
here's
not a lot of money.
The crazy part is if you're dual income, two people making $50,000 a year, that puts you at the median. And that's still...
Yeah, but that's still just getting by.
Absolutely. Which
just
is
getting
crazy to think about.
With two people making $50,000 a year each.
Yeah. It's a crazy circumstance and that's just speaking to the economy at large. Yeah, that's beyond obviously at this point.
And not individual people's situations either.
But by building starter homes, and this is the piece that's missed with this in the conversation constantly. Let's say I'm going to use random examples here, so bear with me. Say you're 25 years old, you're living in your apartment. It's time for you to buy your first house. If it doesn't exist, if there is no starter home for you to buy and afford, and someone's going to say, oh, there's a home in every town. Well, guess what? It's probably in a condition that you're not going to be able to get any sort of normal financing on. It's going to cost tens of thousands of dollars to repair. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about something that's modest and basic that you can move into.
Although you could do a rehab loan.
Yeah, we'll
talk about that another time. But
that's a good one. We do have to do that. If that person who's renting that apartment can't move up to home ownership, they stay in that apartment. And then suddenly there's a shortage of apartments.
Yeah, because if they can't move up to the next level, well, it's happening on all levels of it, right? Because again, you go back to somebody in 2020 or 2021 that refinanced to a 2.5% interest rate, and they're ready to retire and downsize. They can't afford to, even if they want to go into a condo or something, because now they're going to downsize, but they still need a mortgage, let's say. Mm-hmm. Well, because their house was their retirement policy, right? That was their whole retirement account was their house. So now they want to use the equity in that to live on. So they're not going to use it all to buy the next house. So now they can't because they can't afford to have a higher payment, even on a less expensive house.
I'll speak with some personal experience from a family member on this one too. When you're just talking about like downsizing, retirement, the older population, there's such a waiting list at every assisted living facility nowadays. It's absurd. It's years.
55 pluses, assisted living, any of that stuff.
So people it locks down the inventory. Much as, you can make the argument that high mortgage rates lock down the inventory. There's apartments that are built, the 5-story apartment buildings that you see everywhere that all look the same in every single town. You could see one in Manchester. You could see one in Londonderry. You could see one in Portsmouth. They all look the same. And then there's $700,000 plus 2,500 square foot plus luxury homes. And I say luxury homes, granite countertops, top end appliances,
hardwood floors,
beautiful hardwood floors, all that stuff, right? I'm not
crown molding.
And don't get me wrong, I'm not putting that down. That's not what I'm saying here. What I'm saying is that the middle housing for normal people who are in normal, at the median circumstance in the world, doesn't exist anymore. And it locks the inventory down. And what happens this is a great example of what happened the past 5 years. Single family homes stopped being affordable. And then, okay, well, what's the next best thing? A townhome. Suddenly townhomes stop being affordable. Okay, what's the next best thing? Apartment style condos. Then they're not affordable. What's the next best thing? A mobile home. And now those are $200,000 or $300,000 plus park rent.
Oh my gosh. I was talking to somebody just the other day who said, I want to buy a house. I don't have a lot of income. I'm thinking I want to go with a manufactured home.
Yeah.
Like, okay, let's work that out for a minute. Mm-hmm. And I said, all right, you go with a manufactured home, $150,000, which is an inexpensive manufactured home right now. I mean, you could get some that are from like the 50s and 60s that you couldn't get financing on if you tried, whatever. But let's say newer, meaning newer in the last, 40 years, manufactured home in a park. Yep. Okay. $150,000. Perfect. $150,000. That's a pretty inexpensive house, isn't it? Yeah. Except if you're buying a manufactured home in a house, you probably aren't going to be able to get a 30-year term on the mortgage, which makes your term shorter, which makes your payment higher.
Yep.
Once you figure that all, oh, and by the way, the interest rate on manufactured homes and parks is also generally higher. Mm-hmm. because you don't own the land. You just own the piece of metal that you live in. Oh, and by the way, you also have a $500, $600, $700, $800, $1,000 a month lot rent that could go up at any time.
I saw one for $11.95 recently in the Lakes region.
Crazy. So when you add that all up, guess what? That $150,000 purchase that you just made is costing you more potentially than even a $350,000 single family home.
Yep. And because of the lock-in effect or the lockdown effect, whatever we want to call it, I'll come up with a funny name for it, of there being no middle of housing, it means that the home price appreciation we've seen has been superheated on the more affordable starter products. And that's why, I'll give you a great example. In Rochester, there's been a controversy recently from the tax reassessment, where they try and match your tax assessment to market value. People who own mobile homes are having just a panic because their taxes have gone up so much, but the budget in Rochester went down. It's because the relative value of their homes has gone up dramatically, and it's at the bottom end because there's nothing for people to move into.
Right.
So my controversial thing that I started this with, which maybe it's not, is we don't need more luxury homes. We don't even need more condos. I will make the argument that we don't even need more apartments in many locations. We need starter homes in New Hampshire, and we need as many of them as humanly possible. And we need to remove all barriers, which I think we're going to talk about next.
Right.
Remove all barriers to that happening. But what are your thoughts on that?
I agree with that. And I would also go a step further to say that towns need to be more agreeable. Now, we do have some laws that have just been instated recently in state, but towns need to be more okay with ADUs.
Oh, yeah,
right?
100%.
Because that's the other piece of the puzzle of multi-generational living.
Yep.
Right? Because you said there's long wait lists with assisted living facilities, things like that. If you're allowed to have an ADU, which for those of you who don't know is an accessory dwelling unit, it's the New World term for a mother-in-law apartment, right? But it isn't just that, right? Because it can be detached. You can have a little cottage on your property. You can have a mobile home on your property. You have enough land or whatever. You have a mobile home separate from your own house, and that can be considered an ADU.
Absolutely.
So, and every town, like the state of New Hampshire passed a law recently that required towns to allow one ADU. They're trying to make it so they have to be able to allow two ADUs.
Yep.
But towns push back on this and they go, okay, but the ADU can't be more than 500 square feet, or the ADU has to be this, or they try to push back because, again, not in my backyard, right?
Yeah.
They want to shrink the planning and the zoning laws in town so that it make it as hard as possible.
Let's talk about, I'm going to give a quick field guide to how to identify someone who's a NIMBY. This is an easy one.
I love this.
Go to a town meeting when there's going to be some sort of housing project discussed, and wait for the person who stands up that says, I know we're in a housing crisis. We desperately need housing. I just have some specific concerns with this project. Every single time. If you play a drinking game, you can't drive home when you do that, because it is every single time.
And not to say that there aren't reasonable concerns for some things, and,
yes,
and planning and zoning. Like there's reasons for all of this.
This is not me saying that you should not care about your community.
Right. I mean, there's towns in New Hampshire that have pretty much gotten rid of all zoning laws, all building requirements. That's scary too.
Yeah.
Like, we're not advocating.
We don't need to operate at the extremes.
Right. We're not advocating for no rules. We're not advocating for just free for all, because that can have its own set of problems. But I'm saying let's, common sense.
Absolutely. And I can tell you, this is anecdotal. I don't think it'll be controversial though. When we're talking about having more home ownership versus rentals in a given town, and being able to help people move up from an apartment into a rental, and people are like, oh, well, this is going to cause this and congestion and this and that. Say a starter home. I'm going to somewhat stereotype, but let's say it's someone who's wants to start a family. So they want to have their own place to live, to have the space. There is probably no one more invested in their community than someone who is buying a home to raise their children there and put them through the school system. That's an engaged member of the community, like about 100% of the time. Versus, and this is not a slight on people who are renting, but if you don't own where you're sitting, it's just the nature of the beast. You're less involved.
You're less involved because you could easily move very quickly.
And with the current,
and oftentimes do.
And not from your own choice at this point either, because of how fast rents are going up.
They could say, hey, your rent's now $500 more a month. Deal with it.
Yep.
Have
fun. And so people may argue, the response some people may have to that is like, oh, rent control. It's like, okay, cool. That's how you make sure if you put rent control in place, that is one of the fastest ways to make sure that there will never be available apartments ever.
I mean, I would advocate for rent stabilization to a certain point. I'm not saying not all rent to go up, but maybe there should be some sort of laws saying it can't go up more than X% a year. I would advocate for that, because I think the idea that a landlord can just say, okay, I can get way more for this now. Now I'm going to hike it up like crazy because the market's where it's at.
Yeah.
Which is also it's part of the market that we're in, right? And just a symptom of that housing crisis. And if we didn't have it, maybe that wouldn't be a problem.
I think the slippery slope with that is if you say, like, this is an example. I know there's places who have said, oh, you can't raise the rent more than 5% a year. It almost is the Streisand effect. It guarantees that that's going to happen at that point if that's the limit.
They're going to raise
it 5%. Exactly. Yeah, no, and maybe building something into a lease to say to some sort of term that says this is the most it can go up when you renew, something like that. That's negotiable. That would make sense to me.
Yeah,
it would be a lot more transparent than it is now. And
because right now they can just you're gonna rent this 1-bedroom apartment for, I don't know, $1,200 a month, which is probably a good rate right now. So you rent it for your first year, and it's almost like, it's an introductory rate. It's like when you get a, satellite television. Company. Yeah, right. Exactly. Oh, for the first year, it's only $29.99 a month. And then after the first year, it's $150 a month.
Exactly.
It's the same idea with rent. They like get you in there inexpensively to get somebody in there. And then after the first year, they jack it up like crazy.
Yep. 100%.
It's like, well, now, do you want to really move? Do you need to go through the whole process of moving? Well, I'd rather not move. That's a big hassle. It's going to cost. I'll just pay the rent.
And the crazy thing, I can't remember the name of the organization that did the study. We can put it in the description after this, but there was a study that just was published, I want to say February 27th of this year. So not very long ago, 2 weeks ago, that talked about when you look at the average number, because a big controversy is always, well, if we build more housing, property taxes are going to go up because there's going to be more of a burden on the schools. It takes 2.5 single-family homes to add 1 child on average to a school system in a given town.
Not everybody has kids, and actually fewer people have kids now than in the past. I bet that probably that statistic that they're talking about, like that they think it's worse, is from an old world view when people were having 4, 5, 6 kids, where every family practically had children. A lot of families aren't having children, and ones that are having fewer.
The crazy part about that is because it's 2.5 houses per 1 child being added to the school system. That means that per home added, it's like, I believe it's $1,700 is being put into the school system, added, not taken away, that we need to tax more for. And I'm not going to make any representation that adding housing or keeping it the same is going to do this, that, or the next thing with taxes, because it's just like, I'm not going to make the argument that adding more housing is going to make your property taxes go down, who's already an owner. It could, it also couldn't. And there's too many factors at play there for me to say that for sure. But it going up is incredibly unlikely. It's going to go up because of inflation, no matter what.
Taxes always go up,
but not because of more housing. That's not the reason for that. You know what I mean? It's not the driving factor.
Well, and like other things like traffic, people complain, oh, well, you got all these houses, it's going to cause more traffic in town. Do you know that a Dunkin' Donuts causes like 5 times more traffic than a whole neighborhood of new houses do? Because think about this. You put I have a Dunkin' Donuts literally around the corner from my house.
Yep.
Right. I live in a small town. It's like 5,000 people. There's Dunkin' Donuts around the corner from my house. Were that Dunkin' Donuts not there, we'd probably have 1/10 of the traffic driving down near my house that we do right now. Mm-hmm. And I live in a neighborhood with a whole bunch of houses really close together. Right. But the morning traffic is people getting up and heading to work in the morning. And then there's nothing during the day. And then there's traffic in the afternoon when they're coming home. But that Dunkin' Donuts, there's cars coming in and out all day long. And I live pretty close to a major thoroughfare. So there's people pulling off and going in there onto the side streets to get there. That small little Dunkin' Donuts that everybody wants, they want a Dunkin' Donuts or a Starbucks near them, right? They're totally okay with that. Oh yeah, we got a Dunks right down the street. Guess what? That's causing more traffic. And believe me, they're not paying that much in property taxes for that little store.
The first person who sends me a video of someone standing up and arguing in an animated way at a town meeting against a Dunkin' Donuts put in, I'll pay for your home inspection. First person who sends me that video, because it doesn't exist. Yeah. I can confidently say that.
Everybody loves putting a Dunkin' Donuts in.
But the moment we talk about putting one house where a car will come and go, 2 cars coming and going twice a day. Everyone loses their minds immediately. Yeah. It really is crazy to think about. So let's change gears a little bit on the same topic. Let's talk about legislation about this. And in terms of solutions at the federal, state, and local level, and what people can actually do.
Yeah, well, I'm going to say right off the bat that the federal level, I think we can do nothing.
No, and I think
I mean, I shouldn't say nothing. I'm not going to try to, you can call your legislators, you can, vote, certainly vote, but that's about it. You're not actually impacting policy.
I'm gonna make another bold thing here. I don't know if you'll agree with me or not, but I think neither party at the federal level has any compelling case for housing whatsoever for a solution. Not even.
I don't think there's anything at the state level. Honestly, there are people. I know some local, state representatives and stuff. But
there's one
at the state level.
There's one state law I want to talk about that's very important to me, that I think should be important to everyone who cares about the housing crisis in New Hampshire right now at the Senate level. That won't fix it, but it will stop it from getting worse.
Please tell me about this.
Yeah, so it's New Hampshire Senate Bill 84, right? There's a lot of people talking about this in Facebook right now, so I'm just going to say this just for my bias statement. You know what we do for work? Nobody's paying me to say this. There's no funding for me to say this. There's no political action committee, no candidate, nothing. New Hampshire Senate Bill 84 establishes what the minimum lot sizes, that the absolute minimum lot sizes that towns can assign for certain types of housing. For example, for a single family home that's on its own septic and its own water, you can't require more than 1.5 acres for that house.
So they're putting a cap on it. The bill is putting a cap on it.
Exactly. So it can't be.
And 1.5 acres, by the way, is still pretty darn big.
It's a football field.
I mean, I grew up.
It's more than a football field.
The house that I grew up in was 1 acre of land, and again, we didn't even use the whole acre of land. Like the average family is not going to use a full acre.
Yep. And then it says, if memory serves, if you're on public water but private sewer, it's capped at 1 acre. That's as high as they can make it. If you're on both water, city water and sewer, 0.5 acre, which is what my house is on, by the way, which is a pretty normal,
still a good
normal
amount
lot
of
size.
land.
I have my backyard from the back of my house to the very end of my yard. My lot's decently wide. It's like almost 200 feet back. It's not small.
No, you can put in a pool. You can.
I need a ride-on mower for it. Maybe I don't, but I do.
You don't need this is the most controversial thing in this podcast.
Honey,
episode.
don't watch this.
You don't need a ride-on mower.
But so that's what New Hampshire Senate Bill 84 says. It caps what towns can do with that.
So where is that right now in process?
I believe it's in committee in the Senate. It hasn't been.
So this is a good time to reach out to. Do you know off the top of your head what committee it's?
I don't.
Okay,
so
we'll put it.
I'm the uninformed voter with this.
But we'll make sure to put it in the notes.
But that's an example of something that is important, and it's not forcing anyone to do anything on the landowner level. It's saying, hey, there's limits to what you can force everyone else to do. And this is just talking about single family homes, by the way. This has nothing to do with multifamily. This has nothing to do with apartments or built for rent stuff. It's just single family homes. We're capping what we can do for lot sizes here for the restrictions that the town can impose. Because there's towns like we talked about where it's a 5 acre minimum. That's bananas. That's so much space, and it's contributing to our current housing crisis. And this is the piece that people don't understand. When we're talking about, like, take Barrington, for example. Barrington's a great example for this. Almost all the new construction in Barrington is $700,000 plus. Luxury housing. They're talking about increasing the minimum lot size there. If they do that, the fixed cost of land is going to go up. And if the cost, a 2 acre lot in Barrington will set you back $200,000 right now, which is their current minimum. If they're talking about making it 3 acres. If you make it 50% more, the cost of land goes up, and suddenly you're paying, say it doesn't go up linearly, but $250,000 for a lot. How cheap can you build a house on that? You're already at $500,000 and you don't even have drywall in.
So then what is the 25-year-old first-time homebuyer going to do if they want to buy a house in Barrington?
Not have a choice. It's just not a possibility.
More money.
Yeah, exactly. Just work harder. That's a fun one that gets thrown to our generation a lot.
As if not buying the Starbucks every day is going to make them, become all of a sudden a better home buyer.
You can buy a Dunkin' Donuts large coffee every single day, and it will cost you $1,500 a year, and that has no bearing on your ability. Because guess what? This is a crazy one. If you want to save up a 3% down payment, the absolute least you can do for conventional, right? Under certain circumstances, it's going to take you, 7 years to save that up if you don't have a coffee? Are you kidding me? It's the coffee it's not the coffee that's preventing
It's not the
that.
coffee. It's not the coffee.
So,
but that's a good reason we have down payment assistance programs.
Yeah, seriously.
Throwback to our last episode.
100%.
So Senate Bill, what was it, 84?
Senate Bill 84.
Senate Bill 84. So
that's the state level.
That's at the state level, right? So you certainly, if you look into this, reach out to your local legislator, tell them what your thoughts on this.
Yep.
I would say that I was saddened. Continue to talk about the state level. We just had an election.
Yep.
Did anybody know we just had an election last fall? I don't know if you heard. We just had an election last fall. Of course, it was a federal election. The top of the ticket, presidential always gets the most, coverage. But we elected a new governor, and I will tell you, I had a really hard time putting aside all other politics. Right. None of the candidates, even during the primaries, none of the candidates had any real housing solutions. I felt like I was like that because that's what my career is. That's what I do. I know you probably very similarly, that's what you look for too. Like which candidate is going to, fix this housing crisis that we have.
Yep.
Nobody had anything real to say about it. I feel like
the only thing you will ever see someone talk about on the political level, for the most part, get me if I'm wrong on this, but nobody talks about housing affordability in the context of we need to make houses not more expensive. We need to. People talk about
everybody's for making houses not more expensive. Yeah,
it's making you be able to pay more for the house, not lowering the cost of housing.
Right.
And at this point, realistically, there is no way to lower the cost of housing. The only thing we can do is, like, if there was population shifts, for example, that could lower the cost of housing, right? If everyone moved out of New Hampshire and suddenly no one wanted to live here,
that one happening.
That's not going to happen.
I don't think so.
So with the population shift not happening, as we've discussed, we need more supply, and there's so many things. I know you wanted to talk about this, and I'm so happy that when we talked before that you had brought this up. There's the national level, there's the state level. Those two things matter to an extent.
They matter.
But 80% of it is at the local level.
It's that old saying, all politics is local. And the stuff that affects you the most, you, the consumer, you, the resident, you, whatever, what affects you the most is what happens on your town level. Like today, we're filming this on March 11th.
Yep.
Okay. Today is, my town doesn't do a town meeting, but it's town meeting day with a lot of towns, but it's voting day.
Yep.
So after we're done here today, I'm going to go home and I'm going to go to the polls and I'm going to vote for my selectmen and my school board and whoever's, going on the planning board or the zone, whatever elections are going on right now. Those are the elections that actually affect you more than anything, and they have the lowest turnout of any election because they don't get the news coverage.
Absolutely.
They don't get the news coverage. You see some signs around your town and whatever, but they don't get the news coverage, but they absolutely affect you on your day-to-day more than anything else. It affects your property taxes.
Yep.
It affects your kids in their schools. It affects the zoning laws in your town, your ability to have an ADU or what required for an ADU. It's talking about the minimum lot sizes. All of those things are affected on that. And when you go in there and you vote for the town budget, that's literally what the town is going to collect for all of the things that you could do. Can your kid go into a rec program? Though that is, I've been involved, like kind of politically aware pretty much since I turned 18, and even a little bit before that. I voted in pretty much every election, local, state, federal, that I've been able to since I turned 18. And I do it because I know that local election matters just as much, honestly, more than voting for whoever the president is.
Absolutely.
National elections is foreign policy, but I'm telling you right now, your day-to-day life is more affected by the vote on who's on your select board or in your city council or who your mayor is or who is on your planning board or your zoning board or your school board. That matters much more. And I would also go even one step further to say, and I'm kind of hypocritical on this because I'm not doing it, so don't call me out in the comments. But you should be, if you actually have a care for any of this, run for your planning board.
Bill 2026.
Yeah. Run for your planning board, run for your local zoning board or school board, even if you want to affect how your school is, or even for a select board, right? Or
Absolutely.
A city council or whatever. Yeah, it's a time commitment. Yes, you got to go to the meetings and you got to deal with the local town people, and it can be a headache. But I'm telling you, find in your local community how you can make a difference with fixing this problem, if you have any care about fixing the housing crisis that we have, it's not going to happen in Washington. It's probably not even going to happen much in Concord, though I love the idea of this Senate bill that's happening in Concord. It's not going to, like, the major change has to happen on the local level.
Absolutely.
You need to go to your local town meetings or your local select board meetings, have your voice heard about this stuff. That is where you are going to make the most change in your community.
It's important to point out that if you recognize that there is a housing crisis, this is an argument I see in so many different towns. If you recognize that there's a housing crisis, there's an affordability crisis, the only place where it will be fixed is right where you're standing. Mm-hmm. Another town is not going to fix it. Another state is not going to fix it nationally. It has to be fixed exactly where we're standing. And so that means that your town is going to evolve and adjust over time. And what that doesn't mean is that a rural New Hampshire town is suddenly going to have, 15 new apartment buildings in 2 years, right? A town of 7,000 people. That's not what that means. What it does mean is that disincentivizing building affordable single-family homes is, I'll be blunt, it's screwing over the next generation to a horrible extent, because I'm on the tail end of the millennial generation, and people who are younger than me, to say that they don't have a chance, in order to have a chance, you need to make all the right decisions. You need to be incredibly diligent, have an incredible amount of grit, and quite a bit of luck. That's not how housing should be.
No. And you and I deal with it every day with people that call us up and say, I want to buy a house. Okay. And then we work our tails off to try to make it happen. And oftentimes it can't happen just because, and it's not because they shouldn't be able to buy a house. It's not because they're not ready to buy a house or they're not, whatever. It's because the system right now is so set up against them.
It's important to point out too, that these people we're talking about, these aren't pretend examples. They have names.
Oh, yeah.
They have names, their families locally.
Yes.
And if you took their exact life decisions, adjust them for inflation, take their exact life decisions, all the positions they've put them in 2018, they would have bought a house the first month they wanted to.
I wouldn't be able to buy a house right now. Even in my current career, with my current income and all that, if I were not a homeowner right now, there's no way that I could afford to go out and buy a house right now.
No,
and I'm at a point too. I mean, I've got 2 young kids. They're just, I have a kindergartner and I've got an almost 3-year-old. So we're like looking at now, my house is kind of getting too small, because the kids share a bedroom right now. Well, at some point they're not going to want to share a bedroom. They're getting older. Yep. They're almost 6 and 3. My daughter's not going to want to share a room with her little brother.
Yeah.
So we're looking at, we need to figure something out. Right? I'm not going to get rid of I can't afford to pay the mortgage that is required to buy a house right now. And I own a house.
Exactly.
But I can't walk away from my current mortgage payment.
Nope. And there's so many people in that same
So I'm sitting there going, okay, do we build an addition? Do we, do we take a room and subdivide a room? Do we we're trying to come up with alternate options for now. And hopefully, in a few years, maybe that will change for us. But
absolutely.
Right now, we're where we are.
And what you're describing, and I don't mean this to put down your situation when I say this, is not unique.
No,
it is
it is so not. No, it's so not unique. I know that.
My wife and I, we have a 3-month-old at home, and we're thinking about the future in school districts and whatnot, and thinking about what it will take to make that move it's unbelievable. Right. And a few years ago, making that move would have had a minimal impact. It wouldn't have been a big deal.
We want to move to a different town. Okay, let's look it up. We'll look at all these houses and do all that.
It's going to cost 20% more. Okay, not double.
No, exactly.
You know what I mean?
Well, and especially in a situation like you and I have pretty darn good interest rates. Yours is better than mine, but we both have pretty darn good interest rates.
Bill treats his friends well.
I do. Yeah. But it's what it is. So I would say, we need to wrap this up. But I would say, for those of you that are listening to this or watching this, get involved locally.
Absolutely.
And this is a great time to film this because it's town meeting day in New Hampshire.
Yep.
This is where the real stuff happens. And I would say just keep an open mind to the different options to fix this housing crisis, and don't feel like I want to keep it all out of my town.
Absolutely.
Because it's only long run going to benefit you. I'm not saying open up the floodgates, but just make it a little bit easier.
A nuanced solution.
Yeah,
100%.
But this is a great topic.
This was a good one. We're probably going to have to talk about this more in the future.
I'm sure we will.
But get involved locally.
Yeah, that's perfect. Awesome.
Thanks, Bill.
Thank you.